Welcome. My name is Matt Kenny, and it's my joy to be walking with you as we walk down this journey of retelling our stories in light of the redemptive story of God. Now, as we start this journey, we're going to make a couple of assumptions. The first assumption is this: we all have a story. We all have a story. You see, we have this face that we want the world to accept. We want the world to think is enough. And at times we also have this face that we see in the mirror that we know bears the scars of our life experience. So when we tell our stories, we are telling the history of our life, the history of our scars. Another assumption we're going to make is that we are all at different places on this journey. Some of us have shared our stories lots of times. We've told our stories maybe in front of dozens of people even. Some of us, we've never really considered the places where our story contains things that have impacted our life and our relationships. So we're all at different places on this journey. So sharing your story, telling your story, it takes vulnerability. Let's just say it like it is. It takes vulnerability. And in this process, we are not asking you to share necessarily the deepest, darkest secrets of your life. That's not what this is about. What this is about is challenging people to go maybe a few steps beyond what feels comfortable. And so our challenge is just, what is the next click that you need to take, the next step forward on this journey of understanding your story? Author Curt Thompson says, vulnerability is the state that I must pass through if I'm going to deepen my relationship with God and with others. But when we talk about vulnerability, we're not necessarily talking about transparency. There's a difference between vulnerability and transparency. Transparency is where I tell everything. It's where I'm emotionally naked in front of people. That's not necessarily what we're after here. We're not asking you to share all of the deepest, darkest secrets of your life. What we're asking for is vulnerability, and vulnerability simply means that I challenge my authentic self to move maybe a few steps beyond what feels comfortable. I think we all like to live in a space when we share that is comfortable. But when we take and challenge ourselves to move a few steps beyond what's comfortable, we give ourselves room to grow and to learn and to be challenged. So we're asking for your authentic self as you choose to take the next steps forward in your walk with the Lord and understanding your story. So guys, we've all shared parts of our story in different places. And I'm just wondering, for you guys, when you think about when you just kind of first started to dig in and share your story a little bit, what was that like for you, being vulnerable with other guys?
Yeah, I think the first time I started investigating if I really had a story was the concept of identifying it. And just talking to people, it was having the confidence to know that I had one like they had one. And before I really knew that they had one, I felt exposed. I felt like I didn't know what their response would be and how I would come off. It made it hard to jump in. It made it hard to maybe dive into the deep end. It felt like I wanted to tiptoe in the shallow end a little while to see how it felt.
This story thing was completely foreign to me. I didn't even realize I had a story, but then as I started to understand my story and build my story, I got to the point of when it was time to share that story with someone, I could feel it in my body. I just tensed up, and it was almost like I'm preparing to jump off of a cliff, free falling, right? I had a physical reaction to that feeling. But then once I started to share, all of that dropped down, and it was liberating, if anything else. So it was just getting to that point and then being able to move forward, and then everything changed.
So the first time I started to look into my story with some encouragement from other men, it was eye-opening to me to realize how much of my story I didn't want to own. And it wasn't even necessarily bad things or good things. It was just, they were parts that were very uncomfortable to me. And that was part of what caused me to dig in a little bit deeper. But once I was able to start to share, it took, like Matt has encouraged a lot of times, to take one step further than you're comfortable with. And I think that's where you start to find growth. And I found that taking that first step started to make it easier to take the second step, and also being around guys that cared and were listening and I knew would hold my story well. That made a big difference in doing it the first time.
My first experience was on a men's retreat up in Canada. Didn't know a soul there. And when the leader started asking about your story, I thought, I wonder which story I'm going to tell. And after he was so vulnerable in that, I just felt such a relief that I hadn't felt. And being in my 60s, it wasn't too late for me to allow that release. It was like the Holy Spirit was just saying, relax. I'm in control.
Guys, I'm really encouraged, like when I hear the things that you're saying, because my experience was similar. Like the first time I jumped in and shared vulnerably with a group of men, but I'm encouraged that you guys are all jumping into this process together.